Hi, I'm Jayme Lewis, and welcome back to thebasis.net. We're still in the beginnings of this whole 12-week series called The Basics. And today, I'm going to go over some essential left-hand techniques that are going to help you get the most out of your practice sessions. So don't go anywhere. You know you're going to want to see this. Now, the first thing I'd like to bring up, and very briefly, by the way, is something I've mentioned in previous videos from this series, and it's this idea of taking care of your body first and foremost. You need to think about and keep an eye on your form in order to prevent long-term injury, because remember, these repetitive motions can and will lead to long-term chronic pain or injury if you're not careful. So this means things like keeping the left wrist as straight as possible as often as possible. Now, obviously, there's going to be times where, you need to reach all the way down here, and so you have to bend your wrist, or, moving up. Whatever. There's going to be exceptions to the rule, but for the most part, you want your wrist to be relaxed, and you want it to be as straight and loose as possible to allow proper blood flow to your fingers. Another one is don't squeeze your fingers too hard against the fingerboard. There's honestly no reason to do it. It's not good for your hand, it's not good for your fingers, it's not good for your joints, and it doesn't make you sound any better than just a decent amount of pressure would do. And actually, if you think about it, squeezing too hard is going to put more tension, more strain on the strings, and it's going to cause them to go out of tune quicker. So technically, it's going to make you sound worse if you do it. Okay, so all that being said, let's just jump right in. Today we're talking about the left hand, or the fretting hand. And left-hand conditioning is actually something that many bass guitarists neglect. In fact, I never thought about my left hand once until I started playing a fretless instrument, the double bass. Because that's just not even an option on a fretless instrument. You have to have a very disciplined left hand in order to function properly, meaning in order to play in tune. So after studying the double bass and then coming back to the bass guitar with a very disciplined left hand, it made me wish that I had spent time on it way sooner. So here's the main two positions that I recommend for your left hand. You can either spread your fingers out one per fret wherever and whenever possible, or use a 3-fret spacing between 4 fingers. I use this finger spacing pretty much anywhere below the 7th fret. And then I use 1 finger per fret spacing anywhere higher than fret 7. If I need to grab a note that's a fret out of reach, well, it's just a fret away. It's a half-step shift. But let's say that I'm playing a lick up here on the neck, like this. This is a perfect place to use a more fanned-out finger spacing because it's comfortable up here where the frets are closer together, and it allows me to potentially play faster since I have 4 fingers at my disposal instead of 3. Now, one thing that I recommend you avoid as often as you can is what we call lobster grip. This clamping claw-like shape right here. This kind of playing can inhibit your fluidity, your speed, your flexibility, and actually make you sound pretty sloppy too. Now, as with all things, there's always outliers to the rules, and I use that term loosely anyways. But there's tons of great bass players out there who sound amazing, and they play with that lobster grip technique, right? I mean, there's a time and a place for just about anything, so the music that you're playing might sound better with that technique. Certain genres, like funk, for instance, actually benefit greatly from this technique because it allows you to keep the pressure down with one finger and then mute all of your other strings to get that really sticky, funky sound. Now, I know we haven't talked about muting yet. That's coming up in a future video here in this series, so stick with me. We're going to get to that, I promise. Or maybe your rock band has really wild and energetic stage antics, and this kind of grip actually gives you more control over your bass guitar while you're running around stage and jumping off stuff or whatever. So I'm not saying avoid lobster grip at all costs. All I'm saying is that it comes with a trade-off, and that trade-off is flexibility. When you use lobster grip, your palm is behind the guitar neck. So your fingers actually only have one place to go, up. I mean, that's it. It's either up or down. But if you fan out your fingers 1 per fret, you no longer rest your palm behind the neck, but instead your thumb. This is important because your thumb acts as a pivot point. I mean, I can go up, I can go down, left, right, or anywhere in between. So with these methods, you just get more options, right? More flexibility leads to more possibilities. You're no longer limited to whichever frets you happen to be lobster gripping over. So again, just use your discretion to determine which of these techniques you should be using for whatever music you're playing. Here's a left-hand technique that I don't use very often, and it's called an extended fingering. This is another 3-finger spacing that actually spans over 5 frets instead of 3 or 4. You place your first finger on any fret, and then you use your second finger for the next one, but you skip a fret in between. And then you use your pinky, or finger 4, for the last note, again with 1 fret in between. So you're covering 2 whole steps with just 3 fingers. Now, I was actually scared away from using this technique from a former teacher of mine by the name of Bunny Brunel. He's a fantastic jazz legend because he actually knew someone who damaged the nerves in his fingers from using this technique, is what he claimed. Now, I can't confirm that to be true because it wasn't me and I haven't done it before, but I definitely stray away from this technique. However, there's tons of great players who use it. Their fingers happen to be longer than mine, so I just let them have at it. Say I was trying to play a pattern like this, really fast and fluid. Well, to do that with a more conventional finger spacing would be a nightmare. There's no way I can get it that clean or fast without the extended fingering. So that's pretty much the only scenario where I'll use these. Otherwise, for me personally, it's always going to be 1 finger per fret or the 3-fret spacing. Now here's another technique that can be both good and bad, just depending on how you use it. It has to do with the state of your knuckles and whether they're curved like this or collapsed like this. Now, the argument for this one really just comes down to flexibility versus applicability. Think of it like this. If my fingers are bent like this and my knuckles are relaxed and the tips of my fingers are touching the string, well, they're going to be more flexible and so potentially faster. Kind of like, think of like your knee joint. Imagine trying to run with locked knees. I mean, not only would that look really silly, but it's a highly inefficient way to run. You'd be much better off allowing your knees to bend because, again, that offers you flexibility and speed. Now, if I were to flatten my fingers like this, collapsing my knuckles, I've inhibited their flexibility, a similar problem that we saw with the lobster grip technique. It also forces me to use the flat part of my fingers rather than my fingertips. So therefore, it takes more effort to lift them up. I can't travel as far with them, and they just don't seem to react as quickly. And rightly so, because we've taken flexibility out of the equation. But again, there's certainly situations where collapsing the knuckle would be beneficial. I could use these other fingers to dampen the strings and make a bass line extra funky. Or I could use 1 finger to catch multiple notes from the same fret but across different strings by collapsing my knuckle like this. So just like everything we've gone over so far, when we're talking about curved fingers versus flat fingers or collapsed knuckles, it's not really a right versus wrong argument as much as it is better versus worse. And you're going to have to determine that yourself on a case-by-case scenario or song-by-song. Now, here's a very popular left-hand technique called a slur, or more commonly known as a hammer-on and a pull-off. A slur is where we connect our notes together with 1 strike. On a guitar or bass, we can play slurs in one of 2 ways. One is by hammering a higher note after the lower one has already been struck, like this. Or by pulling off from the higher note to a lower note, like this. There's no limit to how many notes I can hammer on or pull off. I can use 1 hand or 2. And I don't even need to strike the notes first with my right hand. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is another left-hand articulation technique, And actually, it has to do with the amount of space that's in between our notes. So for instance, as I'm talking right now, I could talk like this, or I could talk like this, right? It wasn't a good versus bad, better or worse type thing. It was just an articulation decision. How do you want your notes to sound? What kind of attitude do you want them to have? And what type of effect are you trying to create? So when you're practicing your scales, your arpeggios, licks, or whatever it is, be sure to play them both ways. Connected, like this, or disconnected, like this. By the way, the words that we use in music lingo to describe these two sounds, connected and disconnected, are the words legato and staccato. So legato means that I don't release the pressure from my previous finger until the next finger is in place and squeezing the next note. Whereas staccato means releasing the previous note before the next one is struck. It may take some getting used to at first, and that's okay. You'll get there if you spend some time on it. So the best thing you can do is just go slow and keep your ears open while you play. And what you're listening for is, well, is there space in between my notes? Well, that's wrong if I'm intending for that legato connectivity. Or the opposite, are my notes all connected and I'm trying to play them detached and staccato? Believe it or not, intentionality is the most important thing. If you're not being intentional, you run the risk of developing bad habits, and trust me, you don't want that. Now, the last thing I want to talk about in this whole left-hand technique video is the things to avoid. Because actually, believe it or not, there are definitely things that will just sound bad every single time. They're always going to be wrong, and you just want to avoid them because they're going to get you fired more than likely. And it's these three things right here. Number one, avoid fret buzz. Number two, avoid dead notes. Number three, avoid finger slides. Fret buzz occurs either when your left hand isn't holding the fret down hard enough, when it's too far away from the fret, or if your right hand is striking the string just too hard. That sounds awful pretty much always. Now your bass might buzz depending on how you have it set up, but usually it's your left hand who's at fault. So the way to remedy this is to get your fingertips as close to the frets as you can without actually going on topping it and squeezing with just enough pressure, but not too much, not too little. Now dead notes are ones that just don't sound as good as others. They're just like blech. They get choked out because your finger is too far over the fret and it causes the sound to get dampened. So playing the right note, but in the wrong way, ends up making the passage just sound lifeless or dead. Another thing to avoid is finger slides. Sometimes it's unavoidable and sometimes it's intentional, as in the case of a glissando, which sounds like this. But quite often, I'll hear these sounds in places where they just don't belong, like this. This kind of sound tells me that the bass player is just inexperienced rather than it being something intentional. And working on avoiding these finger slides will make you a very clean bass player. Someone that every singer-songwriter, producer, engineer, music director wants to have on their team. So just like everything, know when to use it and have enough control to avoid doing it by habit. So that's it for today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the YouTube channel so you can get more great videos just like this one. And if you haven't yet, please check out the Bassist Podcast. It's a free weekly podcast. You'll find it wherever podcasts are streamed. And practice up, because next time we're going to be tackling another very common technique called muting. We're going to learn how to mute with the right hand and with the left hand. So when you're ready, head on over and I'll see you there. Hey, if you like what I do, please click on the subscribe button right here. And if you really like what I do, then click over here to see how affordable it is to join me at thebassist.net. But if you just want the free stuff, Then click here to check out whatever YouTube's sophisticated robots think you should watch next. I'm sure they know what's best for you.